Yesterday, the Wisconsin election happened. And we could have had a situation where people just voted by mail over the course of the next month. They decided not to do that. They being a whole bunch of people who seemed unbothered by the fact that people are going to get sick and die as a result of this. And the push to move to nationwide vote by mail, both for the states that haven't voted yet, but also potentially for the general election in November, faced a new obstacle yesterday. Donald Trump decided to make it a big focus of his coronavirus press conference. Here is some of what he had to say.
They didn't want to move the election before that. The other thing they wanted to do, which is crazy, at the end of the election, they wanted to have 1 week for proxies to come in or mail ballots. Now, mail ballots, they cheat, okay? People cheat. Mail ballots are a very dangerous thing for this country because they're cheaters. They go and collect them. They're fraudulent in many cases. You got to vote. All these ballots come in. These mailed ballots come in. The mail ballots are corrupt, in my opinion. And they collect them, and they get people to go in and sign them, and then they're forgeries in many cases. It's a horrible thing. And so what happened?
Okay, so that is Donald Trump, despite all of the evidence, which we will get to, saying that voting by mail is inherently fraudulent. It is corrupt. It should be illegal. All of that. So there's going to be some hypocrisy that we get to. But I guess I'm curious if you're if you're surprised that we know that obviously the Republican Party would be happy if there were literally no one who votes in this country. But to go so hard against mail voting, that's new, at least from my point of view.
Yeah. Well, studies show and statistics show that no matter that if the Republicans suppress the vote sufficiently, they're always successful. So this is part of Trump's attempts to do that. But I think more broadly, it's part of his messaging that the system cannot be trusted. It's a message that was successful for him in 2016. It's a message that he's been hammering on Twitter this morning about Bernie Sanders and the fact that the Democratic Party once again stifled his campaign. And so when Trump's able to do that and basically to broadly say, don't trust this, and there's at least kernels of truth, not in the vote by mail thing, but kernels of truth with the Bernie Sanders thing, obviously, then he's able to skate towards re-election because he sounds like the guy who's calling out all of the shady things in government, even when he's one of the shadiest government figures we've ever seen using the presidency to enrich himself. And it doesn't need to be true. It just needs to be effective in terms of marketing and messaging.
Exactly. And thus the task falls to us to respond to that messaging, to make sure that people are not, deceived by people who are trying to stop the electoral system from adapting to the pandemic conditions we have. And by the way, the hypocrisy that he has on this, it was almost instantaneously demonstrated. So he says mail voting is corrupt. It shouldn't be allowed. It is wrong. And then this happened.
Mail-in ballots for voting.
I think mail-in voting is horrible.
But you voted by
It's
mail
corrupt.
In Florida's election last month, didn't you?
Sure, I could vote by mail for that.
How do you reconcile
Because I'm
that?
allowed to. Well, that's called out of state. You know why I voted? Because I happen to be in the White House and I won't be able to go to Florida to vote.
So almost instantaneously, it's like, yeah, it's corrupt. But you did it. Yeah, I did because I can. Okay.
Because I'm above the law. It's truly it's amazing to me. It's like those same people that talk about how marijuana is so dangerous and should be illegal, but they tried it in college once or twice or 20 times because I can do it. Right? I can do it. It reminds me of Mike Bloomberg, who had said that he'd choked up a few times or whatever. That was a terrible impression.
I don't even know if that counts as an impression.
It was like a slight change in my voice. I gave him some sort of foreign accent that he doesn't have, but whatever. But then he's going to lock people up for marijuana use. It's the same kind of deal. And it's this cognitive dissonance when you're a wealthy white man in America, and Trump's arrogance, only heightens that kind of hypocrisy.
Yeah, and it's like we were saying yesterday with all the Republicans saying, like, no, you should just have the elections. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. Yes, it should be in person. No, it shouldn't be spread out over a long time, because he also attacked early voting, by the way. And no, you shouldn't be able to mail. Just go. Man,
Right,
and like I
right.
said, how many photos have you seen of Republican elected officials and right-wing media figures standing in a crowded line in pandemic conditions voting? No, it is not for them to do. It's for the serfs to do. They're gonna vote from. They're gonna sign, and then do some like a wax stamp on a letter, send it from their castle. That's how they're gonna vote. You're gonna stand in line, potentially get sick, and potentially die. That's how it
Yeah,
works.
yeah. Stamp one sigil into the
Mm-hmm.
wax or whatever.
That's
What
what I
would
was going
Trump's
for.
sigil be? Just uh,
It would be a little mushroom. Anyway, not gonna be more specific about that. And look, we know that this isn't just about hypocrisy. This is also about their continuing war on democracy. They want to stop people from voting as much as possible. And the reason that this is very important is that this isn't just about the primaries. We are worried about what is going to be the current status on election day for the general election. And because we're worried, we want to do something ahead of time to make sure that we will be able to have an election and that people will be able to vote. And one of the big proposals is nationwide mail-in voting. He's not attacking it in Wisconsin, and that's where he draws the lines. He's going to try to stop, by veto if necessary, any spending that is going to allow us to nationwide make sure that we have an election. And they're going to try to depress the turnout as much as possible, not because they're worried about fraud, but because they are frauds and they hate democracy and they know that they can't get elected if people can vote. And really fast, let's run through a couple of examples of that. He literally said recently, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again if vote by mail was nationwide. He said that last week on Fox News. He tweeted that we should fight very hard to stop mail-in voting, even though, again, he did and Melania did and the Republican, the chair of the National Committee for the Republicans, she did. They all did, but they don't want you to be able to.
yeah, of course. And I think it kind of brings to a head what Republicans have been trying to do on the state level with gerrymandering and voter suppression that is inherently racist and designed to benefit Republicans disproportionately. It's just doing this on a grander scale. And it reminds me of what Naomi Klein talks about with disaster capitalism. When you have, it's not necessarily capitalism here, it's suppression of votes that leads to more unfettered capitalism, but it's taking a disaster and capitalizing on it for one's personal gain and cracking down on voting, saying that it could potentially be fraudulent with no evidence behind it in an effort to cement one's power. And that seems to be what Trump is doing by discrediting vote by mail when it's obviously not a problem for him to do it.
Yeah. And by the way, and he's saying that this is obviously shady, that if mail in voting was happening, you wouldn't be able to trust the elections. It's just a Democrat plot, basically. Deeply conservative Utah has moved almost entirely to vote by mail in recent years, while the Republican Secretary of State in Washington is one of its biggest champions nationwide. Meanwhile, blue states like New York and several in New England have some of the most restrictive absentee balloting rules in the country. A significant percentage of the U.S. population, something like a quarter of the votes in the last election, were mail-in already, many of them in Republican states. So they can't be, they're just disingenuous about every single component of this. It is not something that's partisan in its distribution. Republicans are pushing for it in some areas. It's to the national Republicans that are terrified about their chances of winning nationwide presidential elections. And in terms of the fraud, we've read this stat, I couldn't tell you how many times, but an expansive study in 2017 from the Brennan Center for Justice, a liberal-leaning think tank, found that the rate of voter fraud in the U.S. was somewhere between 0.00004% and 0.00009%. It ain't real, okay? The fraud in our democracy is our democracy. But the specifics in terms of how we vote, no, it's not fraud, man. It's just an attempt to justify clamping down on people's access to voting, to get more sites shut down, especially in non-white, poor areas, to have voter ID, all of these restrictions. They don't want people to register the same day. They don't want them to be able to do early voting. They want absentee voting to be ignored and to be as difficult as possible. And that is one of the reasons why we are so critical of the Democratic Party when they mimic these sorts of things, for instance, most especially in New York.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder why the Republicans are so insistent on the census going through, right? You know, we do a census and they can trust those results because they want to make sure that bluer areas that have immigrants are unable to get the funding that they want, blah, blah, blah. That's a long, convoluted story, but they trust those results, but they wouldn't trust vote by mail.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're seeing. Obviously, it's staggering. I cannot believe in the same breath that Trump said that he voted by mail, but that he can do it. It was incredible.
Yeah, and it, like, that's the end of the, like, I want the media to be hard on him and to point out his lies, all of that. But again, as I always say, not because I think it's gonna matter, just because we should have like a facade of, media that's oppositional to those in power. But like,
Right.
if that doesn't get through, the obvious instantaneous proof of the hypocrisy, that's not going to get through to his fans. So why would we expect that literally anything else would? Like, they don't care. They don't support him because they believe he's telling the truth. They just support him. That's it. They don't even necessarily know why. He hates the same things that they do. He fears the same things that they do. He'll attack the same things that they want to attack. It's far more fundamental and primal than he's being honest on what he views about election regulations.
Yes, and it's difficult to combat that with a candidate that doesn't have the same amount of enthusiasm on the other side.
Especially if that candidate is going to spend the next few months hiding away. Because now he doesn't have to campaign. He doesn't have to release ads. He doesn't have to go to debates. Like, he's doing like 2 minutes of cable news hits a week as it is. He's sitting at home all day watching Tiger King. I don't know. Bernie does hour-long live streams constantly. Biden, when he was still running against someone, could barely be like concerned with turning on a camera. Like, you think now, when he's not even going to have to run against Bernie, that he's not going to be doing anything? How are you going to beat an incumbent president with someone who is acting as if they don't care whether they win or not? For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.